Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I just want to say it's never too early to hit the thumbs up. Because that's usually the last thing I say. I've got a Bach Stradivarius 43 bell medium bore. Magnificent playing horn from the mid-70s, definitely showing some wear, but I'm trying to keep to my promise to play within 30 seconds. But I do want to say quickly, I will use this trumpet with 4 different mouthpieces to give you an idea of its total ability to change tone. I'm going to compare it to a Schilke B6 and a Benge 4 that I have on hand, and then I'm going to crank up the orchestra. Boys, get ready! And we will actually play along with a number. You'll get a full rendition, all that I can do in the way of working with a lovely Bach Stradivarius 43 bell, not the lightweight standard weight bell, but a medium bore, and a wonderful intonation producer. Okay, tonal producer, I guess we should say. Okay, I'm gonna tootle around just a little bit. Bach 42C, my general mouthpiece, and we're going to use If I Only Had a Heart. I guess we can say the Tin Men did this on The Wizard of Oz. Okay, give you an idea what it sounds like. Okay, I'm going to switch to a Reeves C2J, very deep flugel trumpet mouthpiece. This horn's a little more mouthpiece sensitive than I had expected. There are probably more Strads in symphonies around the world than any other horn. Of course, most symphony orchestras would probably be using the C Strad. They get a definite Strad tone. I've probably had 12 or 13 Strads. I've never had a bad Strad. Never had a bad one. Some have probably been better than others, but never had a bad one. Most all of mine are older, and perhaps that's why. But if you were playing in a symphony, this might be somewhat like the standard Bach 5C, which is a deepish cup. This is a Bob Reeves. It is a 42B. Excuse me, might be like a 5B. Deep cup, especially for Bob, more of a V-ish than the C, but he's got a nice wide 24 drill on this as well. The 43 bell, they say, is a little wider than the 37. Got to be honest with you, I'm very surprised. I don't believe this trumpet has had major repairs done. It could stand some. It doesn't have any huge dents, but it definitely has some dings. Right here on the bell, there's just a little place. Good tech, probably 60, 75 bucks, and this horn would look good. Of course, now, when I was a kid, I wanted the silver-plated horns. Now I do not want the silver-plated horns. I just prefer lacquer. A lot of lacquer wear on this horn, original lacquer still remaining. But a good player. I noticed some imperfections on the interior of the lead pipe. There is no outer indication of red rot at all. Bach uses good brass, very good brass. This bell is bigger than I expected. It's almost as big as my Schilke, which is a 5-inch bell. Definitely, I believe it's the largest flare of any Bach that I've had. I did have a 43 lightweight years ago. Just can't remember, but it just seems to be. In fact, I was comparing it to my Benge, and I thought, boy, that bell is bigger. It's just about as big as my Schilke, so it's got to be at least 4.9 inches. I thought Bach was a little smaller than that. But the 43, again, is going to be made to be a little bit brighter. But this is certainly not a shrill horn. You can probably tell from the recording. Gets a very nice tone. At any rate, there are 43s that are used in symphonies, orchestras. Saw a man recently that proudly proclaimed using a Bach Strad 43. Wasn't a lightweight, standard bell. And I thought that was interesting. Generally, you think the 72, but the 37 is the do-it-all. I tell you, you could do it all quite easily with this 43. Now I'm going to use a shallower mouthpiece. I don't do a real screech mouthpiece under any circumstances. This is Patrick's CR, I think that stands for Comfortable Rim, 5ZM. And wonderful mouthpiece, 28 drill, definitely a little more of a lead commercial tone that you're going to get out of this. We'll raise that song up about a fourth and give it a shot as well. Like that. Now I'm going to go back to the mouthpiece that I use most often. For me, it's an average mouthpiece as far as tone goes, and I like that for comparing. I'm going to play briefly on this again, probably the same song. Then I'm going to play it with the Schilke B6, give you an idea. Another, of all things, medium bore horn, although it's a step bore. And then we'll pull out the Benge as well. All of these horns made in the 70s, all top horns of their time. Top horns of all time, I think most people would probably say. Okay, so we're back with the Reeves 42C, and we'll stick with If I Only Had a Heart, the Tin Man sang. And this is the Stradivarius. And we'll compare it to the Schilke now. By the way, I mentioned again that was a Schilke B6, great commercial horn in its own right, and such a sweet playing old horn. I've got a Benge 4 here, lead pipe challenges, an abundance of red rot bubbled through. It still plays its little heart out. Okay, comparing the Benge, and then I'll go straight back to the Strad to give you an idea of the tonal comparison. And back to the Strad. I've heard people describe the Stradivarius Bach trumpet, the 37 bell, as a very round sound. Sometimes we wonder about the terms that we're using to describe dark, bright. They aren't perfect and round, but I'll tell you what, when you hear this, it's just a little more penetrating than some horns. And I find that to be very interesting. Okay, I'm going to crank up an old classic and do my best to play along with it. Sweet Hour of Prayer. Boys, you ready? Got the whole orchestra ready? Okay, let's give it a shot. Hope you enjoy this. Would really love to play that whole song. Beautiful song. Fruition is the name of the group. You can get that soundtrack at Amazon.com for 99 cents. 99 cents. Wonderful job. Play about 5 minutes of that. I think 3 verses and 4 choruses. Starts in concert C, goes up to D flat for you trumpeters. We start in the key of D, and we're going up to E flat. Okay, once again, just a stellar horn here. Just before I began playing, I was looking at the receiver here. It is unmarked. I would assume it to be a 25. Some 25s are a little stuffy. Have not noticed that on this one. And especially for a medium bore, I was really wondering what it would feel like. It feels just like a standard trumpet. I believe their medium bore is .453, so it would be 6/1000ths of an inch smaller than the traditional Bach Strad medium large bore, which would be a .459. That 6/1000ths, negligible unless you're playing for a long time. You're playing all day, the medium bore might save you just a little bit of chop, enough to make it worthwhile at the end of the day. Always a pleasure to touch base, folks, and I really do hope you're doing well. I assume most of you are, but I got news this last weekend of an acquaintance that had passed away suddenly at 55. 55. I'm 60, and I'm afraid that he probably might have ended his life a little prematurely. There are resources if you find yourself on the downside of hope. There are people that care, and I hope that you have a community, some people around you that express their appreciation for you. Everyone has a place. Everyone has a gift to offer our world. Mine, perhaps, is speaking about trumpets. It's always a pleasure to touch base with you. Hope things are going well. We won't get any more maudlin than this. Hope you've enjoyed the thoughts of the Strad. If you've gone all the way through this and haven't given me a thumbs up yet, isn't it time? Just a little humor. Kick in with your experience with Bach Strads, the favorite. You like the 37, the 72. Had a couple of lightweight 72s I wish I'd held on to. This 43, just a magnificent horn. Let us know how you feel about him, what you like about him. And as always, thanks for dropping in.